Jay. Okay, it's 1911. Thanks a lot for all joining me on this presentation. You're a lot of attendees, and well, thanks really. I'm glad that the topic I've chosen to present looks interesting to you. So yeah, we're going to talk about enhancing magic on your CV or your resume. Before moving to the core of the topic, I would like, and at this point you should have seen the slides changing, to talk about some rules about this seminar. We are 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. You are way more than 100 at this point. I will nevertheless try to make this seminar participative. However, we will need some kind of self-discipline so that this remains manageable for everybody. So if you, there will be plenty of times where I will ask you for what you think. At this point, please type your input in the text channel. This is why it's here. Try to be mindful about if your ID has been said already, rather than repeating the ID by hitting enter, please select an emoji to support the ID. That will allow me to not have a bunch of new lines that I will not be able to parse properly, because what I would like is to be able to address your IDs and to comment on them so that we can use your IDs as a red line to go through this seminar. Obviously, I've got some slides. I've got a line that's in my head. But yeah, please be mindful. Also, I'm usually fairly cool with a slightly off topic, but based on the amount of people, that's just not gonna work. So please do me this favor. Thank you. Finally, remember that there is no bad ID. Eventually, your CV or resume and my CV may be different, and we might not agree, or we might not agree on some conclusions. But the worst case scenario, and I say the worst case, is that we're all going to improve. And think about it: when the worst is that we improve, that's already a positive. I wish so many worst cases were that way. So, going to the heart of the topic, and I'm aware that there is a delay. I think that the first question that we need to ask ourselves is magic CV worthy? And first question that I would like you to answer is how do you perceive indicating playing magic on your CV? I've typed the question on the channel, and you can use a thumb up or thumb down to say that to indicate that you generally feel that it's a positive or a negative. And afterwards, feel free to expand in the chat as to why you believe it's a positive or a negative. I can see that things are fairly split so far. It's like 45-55. But yeah, like please expand a little bit on this. I usually say that it's not so much the answer that matters; it's a thought process, and that is also something that I'm going to try to do. That we're going to try to do through this seminar. I am not going to try to tell you what to do. I am going to hint you as to what you should be doing to create a process leading to creating your CV. So Chris tells us, I see it as negative, not because it's bad, but because I generally feel that other experience is more relevant on my already incredibly dense resume. So first thing, well, it's great that you have an incredibly dense resume, and it's not necessarily the case for everybody. Um, uh, but the and it's hard for me to comment just right now because this is something that we're going to touch toward the end of this. How to select what to put on your resume. And indeed, we are talking about magic playing, not magic judging. Magic judging is going to arrive a little. So Masticon tells us it is negative most of the time. It is irrelevant to most employers. Well, that is almost correct. But well, no, actually, that is correct. It is irrelevant to most employers. But now, what about those employers who actually know what it is? At this point, can this be an asset? Still passing the comments. Ian tells us, I think it uses a lot of skills that an employer might want, but on my CV, I would list those skills rather than the playing of the game itself. I'm not going to have a modern player 2015-2020 there. Well, that is correct. Once put like that, it's indeed suboptimal. And we're going to touch a little bit later about listing things as skills. Billy tells us that it depends on the job you're going for. In the sports universe, it may not be a positive, but if you're talking to a company that does game design, then it'd be far better to list. Well, in the sports universe, even, for instance, being competitive, potentially an asset. So I think it depends on your perception of it. There is still a lot of prejudice against a middle-aged adult playing Magic. That is possible, and that's also what we're going to talk about a little later. Yeah. Okay. Indeed, as I suspected, there will be way too many comments so that I can comment on everything. So at some point, I will need to move on. I'm sorry for those whom I cannot address the comments, but otherwise we're going to be here in several hours. And now, next question. What about magic judging? What about putting magic judging on your CV? So same thing, you can vote thumb up, thumb down on a CV, on the comment, sorry, and why? So far, everybody seems to agree with each other. We're getting quite high. Yes. Anybody to disagree? And at this point, obviously, no pressure. But you would be the only one. Yep. Okay, so everybody seems to agree. So Tim tells us, I've done so, and it was a talking point in the interview. Yep, that is correct. We're going to talk about that a bit later. Lou tells us it depends on what skills you highlight, and judging can be about many things, and that is correct. We're also going to talk about that. It can be negative if framed the wrong way, but that's true for anything. That is correct. Like framing things the proper way is indeed very important. Um, still parsing the many comments. Um, okay, so basically, my conclusion about this, which was like a decently long introduction, is to put magic on your CV. You need to own it. Like you need to be pretty much proud of it. And when I say proud, I do not mean like defend it to your last breath. I just mean being able to market it positively. Um, it's I think it was Diogo who was saying that there could be some ostracizing about middle-aged people still playing Magic, but you can still own that, and if you market it in the proper way, that can become an asset. Like playing Magic, it's about you like complexity. You're able to think thoroughly. You can dedicate quite some time on complex problems, etc. And that is a way that you can market it positively. And in an even more general way, this is true for any hobby or professional experience, which leads us to the second slide of this. Don't worry, we're going to go a bit faster afterwards. Is magic judging a professional experience? So at this point, so I did some research about that. In 2020, like prior to COVID-19, or at the beginning of it, Magic Fest applications clearly mentioned the word work. And then I did some more research in my mailbox, hashtag dinosaurs amongst us. In 2005, applications called for volunteers, but they mentioned, I quote, "It is like work." So even at a time where we had like no contracts, we were not paid with any kind of money. I'm talking about a time where we had $1 a day or something like that. Excuse me. Yep. It was already like work. In 2004, review forms mentioned already things like professional appearance or professionalism or things like that. So a question from Iago Bottino. What is your opinion about using lectures presented or assisted with specific themes in the CV? Can they be considered short courses? I'm not 100% sure what you mean, but in my CV, I actually do put some links to some seminars that I've written or presented and that have been recorded and things like that. Dinosaurs Among Us was about me looking in my mailbox for applications for tournaments back to 2005. So my conclusion about this is even back to the time that even back to a time where clearly judges were considered volunteers, judges were already operating in a professional environment. No matter how we were called or considered to be or whatever, the environment we were told we would be evolving in was professional. So what we learned, and to me, what we learn is that in a professional, what we learn in a professional environment, is a professional skill. And my conclusion about this is that judging is not only a hobby, it's a valuable professional experience, and it should be reported as such on the resume. And now we are going to go to the heart of this seminar, which is the steps to turn to implement magic on your CV. So step one, you should take a regular judging day and list what you are doing. This is what I'm going to make you go through is a very process-oriented thing, so that you can redo it on yourself, and I'm going to teach you that process. So what we're going to do together is we're going to take that regular judging day, and we're going to go through it in a chronological order so that we don't forget anything. And it's also fairly intuitive, because when you think about your day, very often it's like, well, this is what where we started and what I did and blah and blah. And at some point, let's go to the restaurant, which is admittedly a super strong fast forward. And then another thing which is crucial is to consider a different scope of different events, because they each have different scopes. Like Friday Night Magic does not necessarily rely on the same skills than a Magic Fest, for instance. So I have chosen to define 5 major time windows, which I think pretty much add up to working an event. So pre-event, registration, tournament start, Swiss rounds, and post-event. So now I will need your help here. Which kind of pre-event activities do we have? What do we do before the event as a magic judge? Negotiating with shitty TOs. Well, negotiating with TOs. So registration will come later. It's not when I say pre-event, I mean before the day. Advertising, yep, that's correct. Actually, I hadn't thought about it, but that's a good one. Some logistics, indeed. Plan out how you will get to the event. Yes, indeed. However, on the scope of a resume, that is, I do not believe that this strongly turns into something marketable. Build some teams. Yeah, brush up on recent policy and ruling changes. Yep, that's correct. Planning, communication, coordinating staff. Yeah, so we pretty much have that. So my main takes were checking the TO's needs, because as much as obviously like you need to coordinate as an independent contractor, there's generally speaking, when looking for a job, unless it's a job as a salesperson, that might not be like super marketable, but coordinating with your boss or other staff members can be valuable. Prepare a logistics plan, show some skills at organization, writing an email briefing, and reading the rules. Next step, registration. What do we do during registration? I let you type in the channel. Help people. Yes, correct. Set up registration area and the equipment needed. Yep, correct. Crowd control, indeed. Customer server, public interaction. Yes. Solving last minute problems, handling exceptions, keeping people calm. Yep, very good one. Often forgotten, solving last minute problems, and that's really a good call. Collect names and payments. Indeed, repairing printer of the TO. Yep, that is correct. So what I had gathered over here is some player interaction in many different forms, handling money, which is actually a marketable skill. It looks easy, but it's not unreasonable. Handling a computer, or most often the printer, but still, like having computer knowledge actually matters. And everything in a time limited environment. Next step, tournament start. What do we do during tournament start? So what I have in mind with tournament start is once we have closed registration and before round one has started. So those, let's say 10 to 15 minutes. So I don't know how you listen to me, but I've got strong internet issues right now, which may or may not be related to the storm that is around here. So I don't know if you can still hear me. I am trying to reboot my internet connection. Um, Okay, so apparently you can hear me, which means that my phone is not disconnected, but my computer is. Okay, so I'm just going to go through, and I will not be able to handle much of your comments until this come back. I apologize for this. So tournament start, we handle last minute issues, as was actually already done during registration. We do some player announcement, which means like talking in public, which is valuable. Depending on our role, we are performing some coordinated tasks or monitoring them. And we are coordinating with others, generally. Okay, it seems my internet is back, which is good. Okay, so what about the Swiss rounds at this point? What do we do during Swiss rounds? The list is a little longer than what we've had so far. We floor, yes, but what does that mean? Because flooring is answering players' questions, yes, indeed. Be available for questions and assistance. The notion of being available is very passive. And it's arguable whether this is very marketable, being passive. Customer service, fast problem management, yes. Check for tables still playing towards the end of the round, yes. That is correct. We speak foreign languages, yes, and that is very marketable, speaking different languages, even if we're used to speak English, for most of us. Observe matches, correct. Assign penalties, yes. Consult higher level judges, yes. Resolve disputes, yes. That's a very good point. Take care of paperwork, indeed. Okay, so I think we've pretty much gone through everything. So giving rulings, investigating, which is something that almost every judge is doing at some point, even if it's just a couple of questions. Making sometimes tough decisions, communicating those decisions effectively, handling conflict, which might happen after you communicated a decision, after you made a tough decision. Performing some routine tasks, such as end of run procedure, posting pairings, result slips, deck checks, those kind of things. Giving instructions, mentoring, which includes, as Felix is writing, like working with your team, being a team player. Like when you're a team player, usually there's some mentoring going on, and crafting a breaks plan. Which is often forgotten, but that avoids that someone ends up not having eaten anything at 3 p.m. when their last meal was yesterday, the evening before at 8 p.m. And that is not just an example. That has happened back in the days. And now, what about post-event activities? So when I say post-event, I mean from the moment we've posted the final standings. What do we need to do? Reviews. Upload the event to WER. Yep, correct. DQ statements. So many of you are talking about DQs. Like, do you DQ people every event? Cleaning if needed. Yep. Get and receive feedback. Debriefing, indeed. Check with Theo for postmortem on the event. Yes. So we've got pretty much everything at that point. So yes, classic post-event activities, debriefing in oral or written form. So can be seating everybody around the same table or just sending an email. Usually depending on the time that the event finished. Self-reflection, which is not something that was mentioned. I don't believe it, but self-reflection is actually very marketable because many people believe that self-reflection is obvious, but it's actually not incredibly obvious, and indicating that you're aware of it can be positive. Cleaning the room and writing reviews are what I could think about. So now, what we have discussed so far is what we do. But most of what we have been discussing here is not directly marketable. Because if you're an expert in handling end-of-run procedure and you put on your CV, I handle end-of-run procedure, this does not mean anything. And here we're coming back to what someone said way earlier, which means that it's not meaningful to the employer. And the second step of implementing magic on your CV is to trim the list down by broad skill categories. Two goals for that. Recruiters want to know what you can do, which means that it's your job to make it easier for them to understand what you can do And therefore, why you're great? Because you're a magic judge. So honestly, your skills are quite above average uh, versus the general population. Because judging, it doesn't seem like it, but you learn a lot in many, many different topics. So, yes, you're great. So we're going to take every action that we have identified earlier, and we're going to try to turn them into regular work, more generic concept that is understandable by the recruiter. So we're taking those pre-event activities. What is checking TO's needs? It shows that you have like a sense of hierarchy, that you can coordinate. Preparing a logistics plan. Logistics, yeah, everybody knows what it is when you're a judge, but a more generic word would be organization. Writing a briefing email can be self-explanatory, but it shows some skills in written communication. And by reading the rules or like brushing up your knowledge, it shows that you are used to being prepared to what you are to performing the task that you have been hired for. So you're serious, pretty much. And now, and sometimes, like you may want to put some mentions by checking TO's needs. It means that, well, I mean, you are used to send emails or use the phone. It seems obvious, and don't get me wrong, you might not want to put that in every CV, but for some positions, that might be relevant somehow. Prepare a logistics plan, usually uses Excel or Google Sheets. And these are skills. Quite a couple positions actually need some skills at that. Written communication would use Word or Google Docs. When it comes to being prepared, well, that I do not have any specific example, but that's okay. That happens. Now, what about registration? Player interaction, it shows some customer service. I mean, we all know about customer service, so over here, I'm obvious. But well, it's not because it's obvious that you shouldn't at some point write it somewhere. Handling money, it shows that you can be directly in front of the customer and that you've got some commercial skills. Handling computers, computer skills. Time limited, it means that you can work under deadlines. And that is very, very important for some positions. In terms of like specific things that you could mention, handling money, you could indicate that you know how to use a credit card machine. That might not be relevant for every position, but you never know. That's a possibility. Handling computer can be a Windows operated computer, can be a Mac. Not every job. Some jobs specifically use Macs, for instance. So tournament start. Handling last minute issues, it shows that you can solve issues under pressure. So and under pressure is something that is marketable. Being able to speak in public because you've been doing some player announcements. Performing and monitoring tasks, when you can show that you can follow instructions or overview execution, usually while you're doing something else, which is speaking in public. Okay. And apparently we lost video. I am going to work on that. and it should be back soon if I am not mistaken. Yep. Yep, troubleshooting video issues while presenting seems like a great skill. Thanks a lot. A new skill acquired, like right on spot. Also marketable. Troubleshooting on spot. Yep, working under pressure and deadlines, indeed. Thanks much. And so I was at, following instructions, overviewing execution while doing something else. Coordinating efforts shows ability to work in teamwork. And the skill that I could think about for those was like microphone use. Like, you know how to use a microphone. Ideally, you've got some understanding of where to put the microphone so that your voice projects better. Those kind of things. So moving on to Swiss rounds. Giving rulings, it shows some customer service skills. Not only, it also shows that you know what to do. You are able to follow some processes, etc. Investigating can show some analytical skills. Making tough decisions shows an ability to, guess what? An ability to make decisions. That one is like fairly straightforward, admittedly. Couldn't find anything more generic. Communicating decisions, usually you need some empathy, especially when they're tough. Handling conflict shows skills at people management. Performing routine tasks, it shows teamwork, but also the ability to perform a repetitive task without forgetting. And yes, I should be able to post a link to my slides. Not a problem. The fact that when you're a magic judge, and especially at smaller events, sometimes you need to juggle between pairings, slips, deck checks, and end of round. It shows some skills at adaptability. And here's one thing based on a study that I read a couple years ago. Hard skills, especially in the IT industry, can become obsolete very fast. And at some point, more and more companies are looking for people whose main skill is to adapt. Ultimately, even if you barely have a clue about what your job will be, if they believe that you can quickly adapt, you have higher chances to get hired. So adaptability is very marketable. Giving instructions, abilities to manage a team, because generally speaking, you've got the good way and the wrong way of giving instructions. Either you can treat people badly or correctly, but when you do the latter, usually you can be a good team manager. Mentoring shows some skills at educating others. Which can be useful because maybe at some point they're going to hire you to train the new ones. Why not? And crafting a breaks plan shows some skills at overviewing. For instance, back to when I started, a good break plan was 50% of the staff at some point and 50% the hour after. Guess what? We always ended understaffed. And at some point, we moved to 3 waves. Well, I see, lol, what, no, but like it's incredibly important to realize that a tournament, the best practices that we have identified inside the program are the result of 20 to 25 years of a slow evolution. And obviously, it looks evident today that we would not send 50% of the staff and another 50%, but this used to be the standard. And at some point, when someone brought the idea of 3 waves, the first thing that we heard, it was like maybe only 10 years ago or something like that, was, but I don't want to go eat at 11 a.m. And I'm like, and you think it's okay that someone only goes to eat? So do you want to go eat at like 3 p.m. or 4 p.m.? And they were like, well, no. And I'm like, so should we not have staff at some point because everybody should eat? And that's how we went there, because like every change we make has advantages and drawbacks. And when I'm stating this, I'm also showing that even the current system has some drawbacks. Yes, indeed, sometimes people are not hungry at 11 a.m. unless they're from Spain, at which point it's their breakfast. And if they took breakfast already at this point, that's a different topic, because you need to send the Spanish judges at 3 p.m. So to plenty of extent, I really like working with Spanish judges because they're so flexible as to when you should send them on a break. Aside from that, post-event activities. Debrief with TO shows some analytical skills, because you're going to analyze how the day went and you're going to discuss it. Self-reflection shows hints at self-improvement. Writing a debriefing email shows skills at team management, and also some clarity, communication that we've talked about already. And writing reviews shows skills at mentoring. And for those, I couldn't think about anything like a super specific that we have not mentioned earlier. Obviously, writing debriefing email could again be Word or Google Docs, those kind of things. And now, this slide is really crucial, because what we did before was just changing some words into some others. But if we want that to be even more meaningful to the recruiter, we need to categorize them, because otherwise this is a little bit messy and it's tedious to pass through. So I've chosen to put 6 global categories. For what it's worth, those 6 categories are pretty much what I put on on a CV from 5 to 6 months ago, when I realized that I would not be judging much because there was COVID. But right now, these are. I do not believe that these would be the 6 categories that I would put. So organization. So as we've said, we can put in there preparation, logistics, analytical skills, working with deadlines, in management, team management, people management, because that's not the same thing. Like, you do not manage an entity that is a group of persons the way you manage people individually, because the dynamics are not the same. If you want to manage people, you need to understand them and to manage them in a way that is a net positive for both of you. While when you manage a team, you manage it mostly through a shared goal, something like that. And writing clear briefings and debriefings. It's also a skill at management, so that people have the correct expectations and can learn the most. Leadership. I separated from management because it's just not the same thing. Like you can be a decent manager if you roughly manage to make sure that people have breaks and people know what to do. But that still does not make you a leader. Leadership is about you usually gain some leadership first by showing the way and participating, but in on what you could put on your CV, like decision making, when at some point everybody's a little lost and you're like, hey, okay, we need to move on, we're gonna do this. That is decision making. Ideally, it's meaningful, and that demonstrates some leadership. Leadership can be demonstrated through conflict resolution. You've got two persons unhappy at each other, and you need to diffuse that situation. And generally, that is going to show when you show empathy to others. That is usually a strong sign of leadership. Generally, people like to be taken care of, and when you are empathetic to the other, they feel taken care of. So that's just generally a net positive. Teamwork, sense of hierarchy. As much as I admittedly, when I wrote this, I didn't entirely know what to think of it, but I think it does make some sense. It's one of the things that that I figured was a net positive, especially for me, who's been self-employed my entire life. And I just projected myself in the head of the recruiter, who could be like, okay, so that guy has barely had a boss in his life, so why would he ever listen to us? And that could be a legit concern. So being aware that this is a thing and is good, but mentioning it can trigger the correct reflex, or correct, the desired reflex for the recruiter. Following instructions inside teamwork as well, coordinating efforts with others, because it's good to work for someone, but it's better to be able to work with others. And ideally, when you're a manager and that you want to turn in a leader, you should not have people who work for you. You should work with them. And that is a key difference. Education and mentoring, self-reflection, give constructive feedback, write evaluations. For what it's worth, I do believe that there is some value in adding constructive, because this is also showing that you are aware that not all feedback is actually useful, and that you are probably aware that venting is not feedback, which not everybody understands, and which many people forget, especially me when I'm tired, but that's a different topic. And writing evaluations. Yes, venting is fun, but it's also tiring for many people. Now, for what it's worth, usually when I feel like venting, I go to someone I trust and I'm like, hey, do you mind if I vent because I need it? And because that way they are free to say, well, no, sorry, can't handle. Commercial skills, so customer service, handling money, speak to the public. All of that can be useful if you're looking at a position in the realm of sales or things like that. And now, moving to the third step of implementing magic on your CV, you need to identify what matters for that particular position that you are applying for. You might have noticed that many times during this seminar, I have said, depending on the position, or any similar expression, because that is a key aspect. Like if you're applying for a certain position, like you need to tell the recruiter things that matter to them, because otherwise they're going to read some things and they will be like, why do I care? And considering that your CV is unlikely to stay more than 10 seconds in their hands, and that is also data from a study that I read, you are much better off avoiding that the first thing that they fall on is something irrelevant. Because at this point, you're not even going to last 10 seconds. If you're when you have managed to identify what matters, you will make recruiters curious about you, and this is where magic is an asset, because once properly marketed, it makes people curious. Like someone was saying that the entire interview revolved around magic, and I've heard of similar story. And the reason that you could actually talk during an interview about magic is because your CV made the recruiter curious, and out of those 10 seconds, you moved from yet another to, well, let's have a look. Why not? So Will is asking, who should we list as the employer of my L1 judge position? So that's a question that I do not feel equipped to answer, because we do not necessarily write who the employer is in France. So and obviously, while I've tried to make this global, the reason why I'm not teaching an incredibly specific process is because I am aware that resumes or CVs are very culture based. So apparently, independent contractor or self-employed are the best answers. And thanks a lot to those who replied, because I just could not. Can't we now use GA? So GA is not your employer. Definitely not. Yeah, you've got a certification at GA, but GA is not your employer. And so the final step is to take control of the interview. What do I mean by taking control? What I mean is that if the recruiter is going to talk to you about magic, you now have control of it, because you know what you're talking about and they have no clue, and you can use that to your advantage. So, generally, depending on your experience level, you may need to fill or trim down information on your CV. So someone said that they did not really want to put, I think it was magic playing back then, because the CV was already incredibly dense. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you do not need you will not even need it. But sometimes your CV is a little emptier, and at this point, it's crucial to market the best, to market whatever can help you at this point. And again, you need to make sure that what you put on your CV, especially in the main section that should ideally draw the recruiter's attention first, should be on spot. Afterwards, you can have a side section with, on my CV, I call it additional skills as opposed to core skills, because I believe that If at some point they like the core skills, they might want to check what else I'm able to do. And at this point, that could be the tiebreaker. But if I was not sorting this in a way that is meaningful to the recruiter, they would be like, yep, don't need this. Here's the recycling paper, and which is best case scenario. So to sum it up, Magic is an incredibly singular environment because of the wide variety of skills that we learn with it. So you should make the recruiter curious to know more, and that's why you need to, and that's why you should rephrase and then recategorize what we do while judging. The goal is to get an interview and to take control of the interview. So at this point, it's the correct time to tell you a story about a former level 3 judge, French level 3 judge. So she was just out of her studies, and she applied for a position as in the National Research Center. It's public administration in France. And when I reviewed her CV, it was like 10 years ago. I made her move Magic from hobby to professional experience, which was critical because she was just out of studying, which means that the entirety of her professional experience at that point was like 3 weeks as waitress, like summer job, classic summer job. And it turns out that she made it to the interview. And the only thing that they talked about in the interview was Magic. And they were like with some questions like, so can you clarify what is team leading? Can you clarify what is side events management? And at this point, she was skilled enough to answer in words and concepts which were first very understandable, and two, very marketable. And it turned out, and obviously takes the result as a very strong statistical sample of 1 out of 1, but she got the position over someone who had 6 years of experience in the field because they felt that her experience was better suited at interacting with people that they would see only one day. And indeed, the position was about being an interface between researchers and industrials. So most of the time, she was going to meetings with people she had barely seen before. And it's good because we are reaching the end of this seminar. So I've put a slide with a summary. So I recap. The basis is to own that you play or judge Magic to make it and to make it a positive and professional experience. And then take your regular day, list what you're doing. What I listed, I think there's already quite a lot of content, but I'm sure that depending on your specific skills, you are doing some different things. Like for instance, I've not touched, I've not done scorekeeping in the past 7 years, so it's not something that comes to my mind naturally. Which is why I wrote, expand your scope of events because the skills vary by event. Once you've done that, we're not there yet. You need to trim the list down to turn it into broad skill categories. To make the recruiter's life easy and to do yourself a favor so that your CV does not end up in the trash in a couple seconds, but it ends up in the pile of needs to be at least needs to be reconsidered, potentially going to the interview. And to ensure that this happens, you need to identify what matters to the particular position and and frame it on your sheet of paper in a way that the eye of the recruiter will be attracted to what matters and to what you want the recruiter to see first. The visual hints on a CV are incredibly important because, and at this point, it's a concept derived from magicians. How do magicians perform tricks? They do some very sudden gestures that your reptilian brain integrates and is like, oh, something is happening, I need to look. And exactly as Samuele is putting, that's misdirection. And that is exactly what it is. Except that in our case, we don't want to misdirect. We want to direct. That is a tiny difference. And ideally, once you've done that, you're going to go to the interview. And at that point, you need to take control of it using the same principles. I could tell you about that story where someone talked about their favorite decks for 20 minutes, and the recruiter was like, well, that was nice. We're not going to hire you. See you, bye. Obviously, because what's the point? At that point, they made it to the interview talking about Magic. They didn't manage to market it during the interview. Thanks a lot for attending, and thanks a lot for participating. I'm sorry that I could not comment on, especially during the first part. At some point, I had to skip, otherwise we would have never finished. If you want to read some more about Magic in general, not so much about this topic, my blog is named What's Up Docs, and there's like 80-ish articles where I'm trying, just like I did here, to present some concepts and some reasonings, because let's not keep this in mind. The result matters way less than the process, because you rarely have a way to know if you succeeded or failed because of luck or because you deserved it, especially in an opaque process like recruitment. However, if you apply a process properly, at this point, you will improve yourself. And once again, thanks for attending, and I will leave this room to the next presenter, and I will come back just after the next show for my second topic, which is about agile team leading. Thank you, and see you in an hour.